You may have heard the case of the Welsh barber who ended up paying out £3,000 in compensation to a member of his team who was repeatedly calling in sick on a Monday morning. He finally got fed up with her, he dismissed her, she went to an employment tribunal, and he's ended up paying out £3,000 in compensation. Hello, my name's Jenefer, I'm the founder of Silk Helix, and we help small businesses to avoid problems like this, which I'm going to tell you how to in this video. And if you want to work with us, details are in the description below. It's going to be much cheaper than that £3,000 in compensation, I promise you. But let's tell you more about how you can avoid this, because it's so frustrating. When somebody is repeatedly calling in sick, it damages your business. Look at a barbershop. If somebody's calling in sick and you have not got a barber there to do the job that needs doing, you're turning customers away. If they've got appointments, you're having to spend time phoning them up, rearranging those appointments. If you're looking at walk-ins, you're literally having to turn them away. That's business you're turning away for somebody who's not turning up. It's going to get really frustrating. Of course it is. It's going to damage your reputation, because if I keep booking an appointment and my appointment keeps being cancelled, going to stop booking my appointments with you and go somewhere else. So that £3,000 in compensation really is the tip of the iceberg, not to mention having to go through the tribunal system to even get to that point, plus the years of time of this person calling in sick before you've even got there. So what I want you to do is not get to that point where you're utterly frustrated and you just say, enough's enough, I want you gone, and you end up paying out to them who have damaged your business. So what do you do when somebody is repeatedly calling in sick? It is a myth to think that you cannot do anything about it. The judge in this particular case said that they did believe this individual was genuinely sick. But even if somebody is too sick to work and continuously are having to take time off and that's harming your business, it's not going to be a reasonable adjustment to allow them to take that level of sickness absence. So we can still do something about it, even if it's genuine. And yes, it may be unfortunate if somebody is suffering from a particular medical condition, which means that they can't work and then they go and lose their job as a result of it. But particularly if you're a small business, you've really got to think about the business as a whole and everybody else whose livelihood rests on that business. A larger company can afford greater levels of sickness. They may be able to make different reasonable adjustments. What's reasonable in a huge corporate is going to be very different to a small business. So what do? The first thing you need to do is to understand why they're off sick. You need to be talking to them. Ideally, you need to be talking to them when they're off sick, when they're calling in to explain why they're off sick, and certainly, without doubt, as soon as possible afterwards. This doesn't have to be a grilling, and it shouldn't be a grilling. This should be a supportive conversation. Let's go with the assumption that this person is genuinely ill and genuinely has taken time off work. They don't want to. Nobody wants to be ill. We'd all rather be getting on with our lives than being ill. So let's start from that point of view. If we were to find out that somebody isn't genuinely ill, then we can deal with that, and we can deal with that separately. That's going to be a conduct issue that we deal with through the disciplinary procedure. But if somebody's genuinely ill, it could well be a capability issue. We also want to make sure that we haven't got presenteeism, in that somebody's coming into work when they're not ready to be back at work, because that's going to prolong illness. It's going to potentially spread illness around your team and create a bigger problem for you. So there is a balance here between getting people to come to work and getting people to stay at home when they really are too sick to work. It's for this reason that I would recommend, certainly to small businesses, that sickness and absence and anything to do with health and capability is dealt with on a case-by-case basis. We need to be judging each situation on its own merits. It's not going to be possible to have a specific policy that fits every scenario that you're ever going to face. So you're going to need to deal with it on a case-by-case basis, but also have some consistency around your decision making. And as a small business, that's much easier to do, to ensure that you're being consistent in decision making from case to case. Making sure that we talk to people is the biggest thing. So we've got those return to work interviews where we're having that conversation and we're asking why they were off, we're asking what they're experiencing, whether there's things that we can do to help prevent the illness in the future, making sure that they've taken appropriate action to try and resolve the issue, and talking to them about whether this is likely to happen again in future, and if it is, are there things that we can put in place to reduce it? So for example, if somebody is regularly ill and finding that the number of hours that they're working is causing that, we might be able to reduce the hours that they work, which reduces the sickness absence. We may find that this puts us in a situation where we can employ somebody for the other hours. We've got that freedom. We've also got more planned and structured time off. So yes, reducing the hours means we've still got somebody who's not there, but if we know they're not there and we can plan around it, we're in a much better position than just a random phone call in the morning to say, I'm not coming in today, and then you've got to remake all the plans that you've got for that day. If we then get into a situation where somebody's regularly off, we will have got now our records, we'll have had those regular conversations, we'll have built up a picture of why this is happening, we'll have records of what's going on. We can start then to look at patterns, we can start to have conversations about how we reduce absence. It may be that we need to write to their GP, or we need to contact an occupational health specialist to get some advice on the situation, and that's going to depend on the case that we're dealing with and the situation and what this individual is coming forward to us with. If somebody is saying that they need reasonable adjustments, we don't necessarily need a letter from their GP to tell us that they need those reasonable adjustments. And in fact, the GP is not always the best person to provide that advice. And we know currently the NHS is under huge strain and not always going to be in the best position to be able to give us the adjustments that somebody needs for a particular diagnosis. We're also seeing increasing research around understanding why different conditions cause different issues. So, for example, we've seen another case recently where somebody was regularly late for work, which was a result of their dyslexia, and therefore dismissing them as a result of that was deemed to be discriminatory. And again, this one is not something we would have automatically considered when somebody's mentioning dyslexia. It's often thought that dyslexia is purely a spelling issue, something about reading, not considering impacts on things like time management, time blindness. So we do have to consider the individual. And we may find as well that while one person with dyslexia struggles with this, somebody else doesn't. So again, just having a diagnosis and going on the NHS website and saying, all right, you've got this diagnosis, therefore these are your problems, these are the solutions we're going to put in place, isn't going to be appropriate. We need to be discussing with the individual. And if people are asking for reasonable adjustments, we should be believing them. There's no reason not to. And if it makes things better, then great. If it doesn't, then we can look to something else. Or we can say, well, we've tried this, it hasn't worked, therefore the adjustments that you need aren't reasonable, and we can go down that route. So there are things that we can do. It's going to be a case of taking specific advice. If you are dealing with these things, take advice on dealing with each situation that you're faced with, and hopefully if you're a small business owner you won't come across this very often. But the more you have the conversations with the individual, the more they feel that they can bring their authentic self to work, the more that they feel that they can be open and talk about their condition, talk about what they're facing, talking about what might be impacting their health, the better position you're going to be in to try and solve the situation with them to reduce the absence, because that's ultimately what you need to do. And equally, if you do need to get to a dismissal because somebody's health isn't allowing them to be at work often enough to provide the service that you need, then you're going to get to a dismissal with all of this evidence of all the things that you did to get there. You will be able to show that you've tried to make reasonable adjustments, you've tried to have conversations, that you've contacted medical professionals for advice. And so all of that is going to be necessary in order to get to a safe dismissal. If you contact someone like me and you're 4 years down the line and they can repeatedly off sick, but you haven't got accurate records, you haven't had conversations with them, you haven't tried to solve it, we're going to be starting again at that point, and you're already going to be utterly frustrated. Whereas if you start to have that conversation from the first day of sickness, and they may not be sick for another year, great, you've got it on record, job done, in the filing cabinet, forget about it. But if they are off sick again, you've started to build your records up, you've started this procedure, and It's also from a supportive point of view, and the more supportive we are and the more open conversations we have, we will reduce sickness absence. We don't reduce it by being threatening, accusing people, we reduce it by supporting people. If you're faced with a situation where somebody is regularly off sick and you want to work with us, there are details in the description below of how you can get in touch. There's also links to further videos, articles that you may find useful. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button because it does help us to grow the channel and you won't miss a single video.